Hi everybody, how's it going? My name's Dr. MMeany. I'm a senior lecturer in the School of Creative Industries at the University of Newcastle. Now, before I start my presentation, I would just like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging of the Worimi people. My home here in Madawi, which is just north of the Hunter River and north of Newcastle, is on their land, and I would just like to pay my respects and recognise that fact. The other thing I'd like to do is thank the organising committee of this, the 27th conference of the Australasian Humour Studies Network. They have done an astounding job in what are truly, well, I hate to use the term, unprecedented times. Yeah, we get to the point where that term unprecedented is so thrashed, so used, that we actually stop recognising just how difficult it has been to get events like this happening. So, thank you to them. Usually for conferences, I tend to turn up. Yes, I have a presentation organised, but then I tend to turn up and stand in front of a group of people, and to be honest, I am a bit of a stage slut. So this is really quite strange for me. I'm performing to myself, looking at myself, and that's not my natural mode of operation. However, we will live with the joys and the problems that this presents and get on with the presentation. As is my wont, I'm going to start with a couple of statements of the obvious. The first one is, of course, that during 2020, the COVID year, many of us working in higher education had to radically rethink the way we delivered course material. In particular, the thing called the lecture has pretty much, well, it's deady bones. What it's being replaced with are events like this, in which a pre-recorded lecture delivered to an asynchronous audience, in other words, people who are not even temporally or spatially connected to the delivery of the lecture, are presented with material. Now, this is a radical change for the way we would normally deliver a lecture into a large room with a large group of people. But YouTube's been doing this for quite a long time. That's the reason why I've selected a case study of, well, it's an unusual case study. Pterodactyl, Tarol Fixes All, is a parody education information training YouTube channel about how to fix, well, lawnmowers, chainsaws, whippersnippers. The delivery is quite interesting in that it uses many of the techniques of sitcoms and animated comedies. But it does it for a particular reason that allows the user to engage better with the material. So, hiding in there, once again as a statement of the obvious, is a distinction between humour and comedy. And I'll put up a slide in a moment that just has some text on it that positions the difference between humour and comedy. And it comes down to a moment of intention. And that's one of the things that comedy and education have in common, is that there is a moment of intention in the design of that communicative moment. Also, I wanted to have a look at what's this distinction then between the expert and the novice, in a sense between what we would have at one time called the teacher and the student. This example of Tarol, I think, is particularly useful in there in unpacking what is the role of the expert. Okay, to start off with, once again, a statement of the obvious. There has been a lot of research, a lot of work done on the use of humour and or comedy in teaching environments. We'll actually start with just a quick systematic literature review of what's been done in this area. These working definitions have informed the systematic literature review. This distinction between the study of humour and the study of comedy, I believe, is quite crucial. And that is, comedy is always intentionally structured. And this is something it has in common with education. I'm also quite interested in the notion that this metamodern perspective allows us to see things which often are presented as binary oppositions as being oscillations between, in this case, what is important to us, expert and novice. Now, this first graph here shows the number of papers which were produced on the concepts of humour and education in publications between 1980 and 2020. This slide shows those related to comedy. Now, comedy itself also contains the study of the making of comedy. So I combined those two sets and removed the duplicates. And what we then find is that in this particular group, there's 451 papers produced during this period, all of which talk to the value of humour or comedy in the delivery of education. For all that all of these papers suggest that both comedy and humour are useful in helping students retain and understand concepts, very few of the papers actually suggested how you do this. The next set of graphics that you will see are a set of 10 suggestions for how you could do this in a face-to-face environment, and I believe they are still partially applicable to the asynchronous world. Simply smile. Be somewhat spontaneous and natural. A little bit of relaxing of control. That's an interesting thought. Foster an informal climate. Begin the class with a thought of the day. Use stories and experience that emerge from the subject matter. Make them personal experiences. Relate things to everyday life. This is a little bit condescending, talking about their music and their movies. Break the presentation up. Encourage people to engage and share their jokes and stories. Tell a joke or two, but then also admit to not being good at it. Right? Note the date. This is 1987. And this is sort of a interesting moment, which is pre-online delivery, yet the advice still seems to be quite useful. The next moment we're going to have a look at, though, is how does Pterodactyl handle all of this, and can we see any of those techniques in his work? So, Pterodactyl's site. Pterodactyl is, in reality, Tim Gross Sr. He works with his two sons, Kyle Gross and Tim Gross Jr. Between them, they act as a comedy triple with a host of other characters. They have characters who are, well, in many ways, stereotypical comedy actors or characters. There is the local man who is evil to his lawnmowers. There is the new man in town who wants to start up a business in competition, who has all of the evil attributes of, well, the Dark Empire. Tarrell's site is astoundingly successful. He has over 147,000 actual subscribers. People have viewed his video some 48 million times. And those videos, well, it's a comparatively small set of videos, only 370 or so. By comparison to other really high-powered YouTube channels, I should say, Tarrell produces comparatively few videos. Yet, people return to them religiously. The quality of his mechanical work is exceptional. As a tradesperson, as a technician, he is exceptionally skilled. And this is the moment that talks to that difference between the expert and the novice. He manages to, through his persona of Tarrell, the buck-toothed, mad-haired individual, he manages to bridge the gap between his expert knowledge and the novice understandings that his audience have. I'm going to ask you to excuse me for not actually showing you Tarrell's videos. There are, of course, copyright implications to me collecting his work and republishing it, even in a forum such as this. But I would ask you to go to the site and simply pick one of the videos, and you will get the full flavour of that mix of a persona created by a specialist in an area so that he can overcome that difficult step between showing his expertise and still being accessible to his audience. Hi, so here I am back again in person. Well, you know what I mean, virtually in person. The example of pterodactyl, of course, is an extreme case. The relationship between the sort of work that he does to generate videos that talk to a highly specialised, highly technical, highly skilled set of practices may feel like it's a bit of a stretch between what we would do in higher education with our students in an asynchronous environment. All I'm suggesting in here, though, is that step between us, nominally as the expert, and the student, nominally as the incompetent, it needn't be a set of binary oppositions. They're not polar opposites. We need to develop skills in oscillating between those two states, allowing ourselves to be fallible, allowing ourselves to ask the students for the feedback immediately, as if they were our audience in an old-fashioned lecture theatre. We need to be able to read the room. And in this environment, in this online asynchronous environment, we have to put a bit more effort into that. Once again, this is an extreme case with Tarrell. I'm not suggesting that every lecturer out there should suddenly generate a persona. However, it is a technique that I've used whilst writing for speciality press in highly technical areas in photography, cars, trucks, buses, bikes, real estate, finance, all sorts of other places where I've written. I created a persona for myself where I was the klutz. I was the person who got it wrong 3 times before I worked out how to do something right. I'm suggesting that in asynchronous communication with our students, those techniques do actually work. Well, thank you for your time. I hope for all of those people in Auckland, you're having a truly beautiful time. And for everyone else online, well, missing you already.
Now there's your dinner.